Yeah, man, we recording right now, man.
Peace.
Yeah.
Mind Ascension here. Peace to my 6 to 22 strand, 7 to 9 ether, selenium based youth, melanin.
Right.
Black gods of this earth. You know, I'm here with my brother once again, the law student. Gotta say it every time, you know what I'm saying?
What's good,
But
y'all?
here with one of my students, man. Good brother, man. We always have great conversations. So
Right.
we just gonna jump right into this, y'all. We out in the elements.
Hell yeah,
Rise shining bright on us.
Hell
See
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We in the wind, Tef Newt, all that good stuff.
Right.
So let it go, brother. Let's do this.
All right, so something was on my mind lately, right? I was thinking about like where did the African people, where did they go wrong? Somebody told me that before Europeans, it was the Arabs who underdeveloped Africa.
Okay.
Like who's truly responsible for the underdevelopment of Africa? Is it the Europeans or did the Arabs or the Muslims or whatever you want to call them? Did they have a head start? Because I heard they had like maybe a 1,000-year head start, something like that, or 700-year head start before the Europeans. What was that? Like, what did the Arabs do to Africa that caused them to be underdeveloped?
Well, that's a very simple answer because once again, you have to remember the so-called European or recessive was in a cave-dwelling stage during those times. So they didn't have the mental capacity, the physical capacity to enslave anybody.
Okay.
Now, remember, the so-called Arab was nothing but an amalgamation of the recessive and the African combined.
Right.
This is why they do have certain forms of mental capabilities and certain forms of so-called civilized aspects to themselves combined with a barbaric aspect. So when you talk about, let's give it a second, let the train go right now. When you talk about the chronology of our enslavement and the falls of our kingdoms, yes, the Arab comes first, because the Arab does have about 800 to 1,000 years of our enslavement. Now, what specifically is that? That is the Gold Coast slave trade. Where they would take Africans from the Gold Coast. You had huge slave castles and capitals like Zanzibar, all these different another one, I forgot the name of it right now, it'll come back to me. But damn, I just had it. I hate when that happens. But anyway, the fact of the matter is they spent 800 to about 1,000 years trading Africans from the Gold Coast to the Mediterranean.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely. They have about 800 to 1,000 years of underdevelopment of Africa. And also you got to remember that after the Greeks came in about 330 or 325 BC, after that the Romans came in. Once the Romans came in, that was the official real downfall of so-called Africa. Remember, right after the Romans was the Arabs. And so the Arabs have about
Long Island Railroad customers. The 2:42 a.m. train to Penn Station is expected to arrive on track 1, platform A, in approximately 6 minutes.
Okay, so now y'all know that. Okay, that's good for y'all to know. But anyway, yes, the absolute fact is that they did have about 800 to 1,000 years of trading Africans from the Gold Coast to the Mediterranean. And of course, during this time, we also have to remember that we had a lot of amalgamation. We had a lot of crossbreeding going on to where they would crossbreed with Africans and they would put that amalgamated son as a general within African and Arab armies. So this is another reason why it was so easy. A lot of people always wonder why. Well, how did this happen? Was the Africans were so powerful? The Africans were so this? How they get enslaved? Because we trusted the amalgamated aspects of ourselves. When we saw another brown or black person, we saw ourselves. So when Arab breeded with a black woman, which is what all of them did, anytime anybody ever invaded our kingdoms, one of the first things they did was they married an African woman, was they married an indigenous woman to create a bond between the bloodlines. And the heir that was born out of that union was the one that was placed in rulership. Here's the problem. The heir that was born out of that interracial union of the Arab and the African woman was raised under the male of the invader. So therefore, take it as me as a black man mating with a white woman. And then I give birth to a mulatto child. But I raised the child as a black man, original man, knowing that his mother is an animal, knowing that his mother is a six ether, beast, grafted mutation, and guess what? Who he's going to be in favor of when he grows up? The black man and the black woman.
Right.
But it was the opposite when we were under that invasion and that amalgamation. They raised those sons who became heirs to those kingdoms, who became heirs and generals in those armies that literally began to invade territories and take over and expand their empires across land with this notion that the Arab father or the white father was the original superior aspect to the African mother. And a lot of times those African mothers was taken as captive. A lot of times those African mothers were the mothers within Arab harems and so-called brothels and this and that. So they had no say, they had no power, and therefore those children that were the products of those amalgamated relationships or those cross-breeding relationships were brought up purely under the male patriarchal side of only knowing Arab culture, Arab history, European culture, therefore growing up to already hating themselves. So therefore, when they became generals within these mass armies, when they became generals within these African armies and these Arab armies, of course they treated the Africans even much less than the white person or the Arab himself treated us, because they had the combination of their own self-hate and the indoctrination from that male parentage or that patriarchal parentage that taught them that any other race or any other group was below them as an Arab or as a European. So, absolutely, the Arab has a large part that came first before the European, but here's the thing, the Arab did not internationalize slavery, because the Arab kept slavery between the Gold Coast and the Mediterranean. What the European did was the European internationalized slavery. So they expanded slavery to an almost global aspect. Not only that, they introduced so-called breeding camps and breeding systems. The very first and oldest breeding system in history, in global history, was the Assyrians with the Indus Kush Valley, creating the Dravidians or the Untouchables. So when we do the chronology, yes, the Arab is the first to enslave you. That is absolute historical fact. But the biggest aspect of chattel slavery, the biggest aspect of your dehumanization, the biggest aspect of breeding camps and breeding systems to breed out of your melanin comes from the European. Because remember, the Arab couldn't breed out your melanin because the Arab is already melanated. So when the Arab mixed for you, it made another melanated child that unfortunately most likely was a 7 ether or 8 ether, but they still look like a black person. You see what I'm saying? So you can't breed out the melanin using another melanated person. You see what I'm saying? So they didn't even have that notion in their mind to do that. They just wanted you to stay inferior to them. That's it. But when the European came along, it was a whole nother system that expanded itself into trying to breed you out of existence and trying to amalgamate you into a certain group, mulatto-sizing you, creating a border or what they call a buffer zone with the mulattoes in between you and the pure European. You see what I'm saying? So yes, the Arab historically is the first to enslave you. Yes, the Arabs' expansion of empire came from your help. Because remember, the original Moors, well, I'm not going to say original because they actually go back way older than we truly know, and I'm not going to go into that right now. But the original dynasties, one of the first was called the Umayyad dynasty. And the Umayyad dynasty was largely majority African descendant. But they aligned themselves with Arabs based on their, how would you say, on their affinity or on their agreement with Islamic religion. So because they both believed in the Islamic religion, they aligned themselves together and they expanded the Arab empire throughout Europe, throughout North Africa, and so on and so forth. So absolutely, and this is why it's very important that we should understand that the Dom mulatto, which is different from the sub mulatto, and I'll explain that in a second. The Dom mulatto being what? The white person breeding with a black person to produce a mulatto child who is a black person. Let's acknowledge that first, but then simultaneously, let's also acknowledge that the mulatto or the Dom mulatto was part of your destruction. So it's a flip side aspect, because I see a lot of black people today, and I did a video on this called What Makes You Black, so I don't need to go into that. But I see a lot of people today that want to try to reject or separate themselves from a mulatto-sized black person only later to find out that they have a white parent, because if they didn't find out they had a white parent, they would think they were a regular black person. And I can name plenty of celebrities that your ass never knew had a white mama, And until you find out they had a white mama, now they're not black enough for you.
Like
But
Halle
that
Berry.
doesn't, okay, but that doesn't take away the absolute fact that in our history, in our destruction of our kingdoms and our empires, began with the mulatto-sized child or the heir to the next throne who brought the different factions into our kingdoms. One of them, the most popular aspects would go back to Egypt, was Pessimedicus. Pessimedicus was a pharaoh who was a breeding of Greek and African stock. So Pessimedicus was an amalgamation in himself, and he rose to pharaohship around 600, between 700 and 600 BC. He was the one that introduced the Persians and the Greeks and stuff into Egypt, or Kemet at the time. And we also have to remember that Kemet had laws against that shit. And this is the thing we don't get. We weren't a people that just embraced every fucking body. I'm about to say, I thought that was the phone doing it. We weren't a people that just embraced every fucking body for no reason.
Right.
We understood that there was something wrong with these Greek people. We understood that there was something wrong with these Nordics. There was something wrong with these Asiatics. This is why we actually had laws. We had immigration laws. We need to study that. We had immigration laws that were very strict during our time of rulership.
Right.
The problem was when amalgamated rulers and generals came into power, they broke those laws and they decimated those laws to the point where our kingdoms was flooded with Greeks and with Persians and with all these different people who created more amalgamations within the kingdoms, more crossbreeding, and therefore more destruction of the natural indigenous original culture of that land or that region. So, you know, this is the things that we have to realize, and we have to know the truth and the facts about them, and know the science behind it, and know that right now when you do see a Don Mulatto, you are looking at a black person. But a sub mulatto is different. A sub mulatto is what they call an honorary white person. This is an Italian. This is a Spaniard. This is a Portuguese. This is Armenian. Okay? These are white people or Southern Europeans who at one time were not considered white, but today they are. You know why? Because the true two-strand recessive sulfur base is at such a minute microscopic number that they have to honorarily include these other sub-mulatto portions of people. Don't get it twisted. They not black people. I don't want us to get confused, but I want us to know that when you are looking at a white person who has dark hair, who has dark brown eyes, who has the ability, listen to me closely, the ability to tan. The ability to tan. What does tanning mean? Tanning does not mean turning red. Tanning does not mean turning pink. Tanning means you have the ability to turn slightly more tan or slightly more brown.
More brown,
So if you see a person in the sun and they get pink or they get red, they not tanning, they burning. But when you see an Italian who can sit on a beach and then they get darker, that's a person that is only able to do that because there is melanin stock within their bloodline that goes back centuries from the Etruscans in Sicily and Italy.
That makes sense.
You understand?
So I guess they not white.
Once again, let's be clear. These are white motherfuckers. We don't want to include them. We just want to know the science of why they are not the two-strand. Because the pure two-strand sulfur base is the real white man, and he is a microscopic fraction of the population on this planet. This is why he needs to include everybody that's not black. And make them honorary whites. Okay? So I don't know if that I mean, got most of that out of the way, or whatever the case may be. Anything you want me to expand on that one, or what? You know, let me know.
Let me see. So basically, the enslavement that the Arabs put on Africa is what kept us behind. It kept us from moving forward because.
Okay, well, let me make this clear once again. Let's do the chronology.
All right.
Okay, the very first invasion into so-called Egypt or so-called North Africa was the Hyksos, 1675 BC. They ruled only a small portion of Lower Egypt, which the recessive has switched the map around, and you think that's Upper Egypt, but that's Lower Egypt. They ruled a small portion of Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt. I believe it was Heliopolis. I forget the exact location, but they ruled a small portion of Upper Egypt for anywhere between 100 to 150 years. During that time, they introduced Asiatic practices. They amalgamated with the people, and infected the blood of the people. This doesn't matter. I just have to state this because 1675 BC that's still not only a very long time ago, but you were still heavily Nubian anyway.
Right.
So it barely affected you, but there were practices that you did adopt that you never had until they came. Next, we got to go further down the line, and we're dealing with the Assyrians. The Assyrians come in around 800, 1000 BC.
Right.
Okay? And then you have Nubian princes like Pianki, Taharka, who ran the Assyrians out. Okay? Now, the Assyrians are pure white motherfuckers. Now, if you study the Assyrians,
right.
these were the most barbaric. I mean, they would make bowls out of baby skulls.
That's crazy.
They would skin people alive and make clothing and pillowcases out of the skin.
Right.
They did the sick. They drank blood directly. I mean, they were just sick people. Now, after that, you have the Persians. Okay. After the Persians, you have the Greeks. So what I'm trying to explain to you is, you have a succession of numerous levels of invasions that are breaking the African piece by piece by piece. Not only breaking the African spirit and culture piece by piece,
right.
but amalgamating with the African blood.
Right, right.
And giving birth to generations of mulatto-sized Africans who become confused in their origin.
Right, right.
And therefore rise to ranks within certain armies and choose the side of the invader. So by the time you finally reach the Arab,
right.
we already fucked up. And that's a fact. By the time the Arab finally got there, we were fucked up.
Right, right.
Egypt fell, it was already destroyed, everything was already fucked up.
Right,
so
right,
there
right.
is no, oh, they convinced. No, we were already fucked up.
Right,
the
right,
Romans fucked us up bad. You
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Amalgamated the hell out of us. They introduced new forms of fake ass gods that had us. It's funny too that we speak about this because this book right here, which is one of the 7 to 8 books I'm reading right now.
Okay.
I always got to keep my sword on me, so sometimes I just grab random books from my stack. You know how I do, brother.
Right.
My stack in the shop, and I just grab a random book. I always got to have a symbolism on me
Right.
of knowledge. Because when any of these recessive motherfuckers see me,
Yeah.
they know that there's something different about me and they treat me as such. But
Yeah.
anyway, this book actually goes into the fact that the Romans introduced a new succession of gods that went against the gods of the indigenous people.
Right.
Because the gods of the indigenous people wanted you to understand that your humanity was your captivity.
Right.
They wanted you to understand that your lust was your demise. Wanted you to understand that your ego was your demise. But when these Romans introduced the other gods, one of them was called Liber, Lieber. Look that up, Liber, which by the way, liberty comes from. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So we got to understand that this god enforced sexual practices, orgies, homosexuality. They used the aspect of deitism to solidify and enforce their sickness onto a foreign people while they invaded them. Because they understand that these people that they invaded were such a spiritual people
Right.
that they could not convince them of anything unless they said another god said it. You understand?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
actually goes in what you were saying earlier about Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
They knew that they couldn't just say something from them. They couldn't do that.
Right,
they had to
right,
invent
right.
some type of god, some type of deity, some type of spirit
Right, right.
to inflict
Okay.
or to impose
Yeah.
the sickness upon a people who are purely spiritual.
Right.
Okay? So my main point is, when the Arab finally arrived,
Right.
you were already broken. You were broken in spirit, you were broken in culture, and you were broken in custom.
Right.
So it was nothing for the Arab to do what he did. And not only that, you got to remember, when the Arab arrived, there was already amalgamated versions of you.
Right.
So guess what? You sided with the Arab when they came too.
Yeah, basically.
So you joined those Arab armies.
Right.
You joined Islam. And you helped them expand their empires through North Africa,
Right.
through West Africa, through Europe, through the Mediterranean. And Islam would not be what it was today if it was not for the Moors and the North Africans. If it wasn't for the Moroccans or the Mauritanians, or better yet, the Carthaginians. Because when we start using these terms, which a lot of Moors do, when we start using these terms like Morocco, Mauritania, we're only using terms down the chronological line of that state and time they were in.
Right.
Because those are not the most ancient terms of that land. If you want to go back to one of the oldest that I can say now, and I can't pronounce it the right way, but Carthrite, that's a little older.
Okay.
But you have to say Carthagenia.
Right,
You have
right.
to say Carthage. You see?
Right.
Now you calling it Morocco and all this shit. But that whole area was a Carthage, was Carthaginian. You
Right.
see what I'm saying? So, which is Africa. So we have to understand that we can't stop and become content in any portion of history.
Okay.
Because that's what I see a lot of us do. Some of us stop at Kemet and we just get stuck in Kemet. Some of us stop in Morocco and we get stuck as Moors.
Right.
Some of us stop from 711 to 1400s when the Moors ruled Europe, and we stopped there. But at the end of the day, you have literally millions of years of civilizations on this earth. So for you to stop anywhere is discredit yourself from the greatness and divinity that you held within this planet.
Right, right.
Okay? You ruled all these lands. You civilized all these lands. You started civilization on every land on this planet. You are indigenous to the entire planet, not one piece of fucking land.
Right.
So when you stop at any place and say, I am this, I'm just an Israelite, I'm a Moroccan, I'm a Moor, I'm a Commission, you're a fucking idiot.
Right.
Because you're not realizing that the origin of all of that is by far way older, by far way advanced, and by far way divine than the shit that you're clinging to today.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, we were already... It stopped?
No, it's 20 minutes.
Okay. We were already broken.
Right.
Our customs were destroyed.
Right.
Our cultures were destroyed.
Okay.
Our gods were amalgamated. Our blood was amalgamated. And then here comes Arabs who have a slight complexion.
Right.
Think about it. Just imagine. Let's think like humans right now.
Yeah.
If for the last couple centuries you were ruled by a people who had pale skin and dark hair, and then all of a sudden somebody shows up to save you from those rulers,
right,
and they have tan skin,
right,
okay, and look a little bit closer to you,
right,
you are going to embrace them,
right,
to save you from those Romans. But what happens is they became the new monkey on your back.
That's fucked up, right?
And not only did they become the new monkey on your back, but they instilled even newer customs,
right,
and a newer religion. That was the most newest religion on this planet. Islam is the most brand new fucking... If we're gonna talk about Islam the way it really should be,
right,
like the Rig Vedas,
right,
all the original aspects of Islam, that's a different story. But if we're gonna talk about Allah and all that bullshit, that's the newest goddamn shit on the planet. Brand fucking new. Damn. And your goddamn prophets never fucking existed. Muhammad and all that bullshit never fucking existed. And if you look back, and if we go even further to who we want to call Moses and all this stuff, if we do the chronology to the time frames we want to say when these people existed, you're talking about Tutmos the Third. So when I drop the Tut and I leave the Mos, now he becomes Moses. And I could do that with numerous different characters from your Bible, numerous different characters from all your religions, because they all come out of Egypt. You see?
Yeah.
So you are the origin of everything. Your enslavement only came after your amalgamation. Once your blood was mixed, once your mind was mixed, hell yeah, it was easy to enslave you. But here's the funny part, and this is gonna make my point. You know who always saved your amalgamated ass? The Nubians. Okay. The Nubians always came from the south. The Sudanese always came from the south and ran out your invaders. From Pianki to Taharqa, they always saved you, because this is why today they don't pay attention to Nubia. Because Nubia is so fucking black, you can't even debate whether it was mixed. You can't even debate what color they were. That's why they don't pay attention to Nubia.
South Sudan? Say it again?
Sudanese.
Yeah.
The Sudan, Meroe, Nubia, all of these is the same fucking place, because we gotta understand that these were empires.
Right.
Now today they're all diced up.
Right.
Because after the conference of Berlin and all this shit, they took small portions and pieces of these places, renamed them, and claimed them for whatever European society they claimed, whether it was France, Germany, or whatever the fuck.
Right.
But at the end of the day, during their time of height, it was one gigantic empire, which was basically Central Africa, basically.
Right.
South and Central Africa. This is where the blackest people come from. And they will come up or down, basically, because like I said, they reversed it on you. They will come down the Nile to Egypt and save their brothers, sisters, and cousins from the invaders who came from the north.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is the pure black bloods understood who they were, and during times of your falls and histories and dynasties, they restored order. Here's the problem. Your invasions never stopped. And just like today, white people can't leave you alone, back in the day, they never left you alone either. And you know, another big problem we have, which is our humanity, if you study Manar Ptah, who was one of the first pharaohs of the original 1 to 3 dynasties. I forget what specific dynasty, but right now I'm talking about the oldest pharaohs when Egypt was united and the dynasties began. Now, of course, there's way more pre-dynastic history, but I'm going by what Europeans want us to believe. So, Manar Ptah, Aha, and Narma, who are the same person, these pharaohs who united Egypt came from the south. They came from Nubia.
Right.
So we got to think now. If the European scholar tells you that the very first Egyptian dynasties was between 4100 BC and 3800 BC, if we also know that these first dynasties was established by Narmer, whose real name is Aha, or original pharaohs like Menapata, where did they come from? And not only that, did they come as primitive people, or were they already leaving one civilization to start another one? So what am I saying? If the first dynasties of Egypt go back to 4100 BC, and the ones who established the union between the upper and lower kingdom came from Nubia, that means they already came from a dynastic period in Nubia. So they were already advanced.
Right.
Even if you study white scholars, they'll tell you that there is no primitive time in Egypt. There is no time in Egypt where they could go, Egyptians was banging on rocks trying to start fires. Egypt was advanced from the beginning. You know why? Because it was established by already advanced people.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, Nubia is the grandparent to Egypt, and Nubia was already far advanced, which means that your advancement goes back way before your 4100 BC Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, that's on that note, man. That's on that note.
Hey, right.
All right. We're going to shut this down, y'all. My brother got to go. But bottom line, I want this to be clear.
Yeah.
The amalgamation or the submulatto, or the domulatto is a black woman or a black man, because they still possess the scientific and the phenotypical aspect that makes them black. And guess what? Nobody's confused about that except your black ass. Because a policeman will still shoot the shit out of J. Cole. A policeman will still murder any motherfucker you find out got a white mama, just like they're a black person. It's your dumb ass that's still debating whether they black or not. Right. Number two, yes, the mulatto was the cause of your downfall. Absolutely. We are not denying that. The mulatto was the biggest key to your destruction. But that does not mean that we reject them for what it is. Because you know why? Other black motherfuckers was the key to your destruction too, who have both black parents. So what am I really saying? It's the fucking mind that comes long before your parentage. All right? So on that note, I love y'all. Subscribe, comment, share. Mine Ascension out. Peace. Love y'all. All right.